to pick on Christianity, but unfortunately, and I think it is unfortunate, the structure of this debate was in such a way that the advocate for God was a Christian. Anyways, my question is what sort of reasoning you can give for, or reasoning you can give for believing in or knowing that Jesus Christ, and I'm assuming that without Jesus Christ, Christianity doesn't hold without him. How can you justify that he's any different than John Fromm, which was a point that Dennett was making? And then to Dennett, my question would be, couldn't you just make the case that the belief in goodness, which you were talking about, is exactly God?
We have to be very, very brief.
Yeah, I think that goodness is what we need to believe in and what we need to thank and what we want to add to. And if God is as mysterious as many who believe in God say, then maybe God just turns out to be the human goodness that we have around us. It's super, and it's natural. It's just not supernatural.
Okay. Yeah. We're going to go to the next question, because we have to move on. Thank you.
My question is for the professor, and it has to do with the ethics of debate, and by that I mean the integrity that each debater brings to the debating table. At the heart of your case, you have charged Mr. D'Souza repeatedly with engaging in cartooning of your ideas, by which I understand you to mean that he diminishes the substance of your ideas so as to the more readily destroy them. My question to you is, when you then when you elevate Stalin to the status of a god, have you then done exactly the very same thing that you charge him with? And in so doing, in the process of elevating him to the status of a god, is that a reflection of that growth and maturity that you advocated a moment ago for humanity?
Maybe you misunderstood my point about Stalin. Stalin took himself and advertised himself to be, in effect, a god, and built up around himself a pseudo-religious, quasi-religious, proto-religious set of institutions. And that was my point. I don't see that I was caricaturing anything that D'Souza said. No, but there are many gods that are not the God of which he speaks. He didn't speak about Thor or Odin either, or for that matter, John Frum.
Thank you. Next question.
This question is for Dinesh. Earlier in your argument, you largely ridiculed both Daniel Dennett and most atheists as the caveman who stands at the end of his 2-kilometer territory and says, well, since I can't see anything else out there, it must not be there. And he stated that this was actually an impediment to human thought, or would be an impediment to human thought. But by stating that God is something that you can never truly understand and is outside of your own experience, and therefore you can never truly understand creation or how the human mind really works, aren't you then the caveman that stands at the end of your territory and says, well, as I can't understand what made all that out there, I guess I'll never be able to understand it and I shouldn't even explore it. And isn't that just as much of a hindrance to human, the forwarding of the human race?
Let's explore this more closely. Do you mind if I ask you a question or two back? Would you agree that if we were to, for example, ask a dog, even if we had a way to communicate with it, to explain Newton's laws, would a dog be capable of doing that?
Communicate then maybe, but not right now.
So you think the failure of the dog is merely one of articulation,
No, I think
not comprehension?
Isn't a creature that's capable of that kind of understanding, that level of understanding?
Exactly. All right. And you would agree that this is true of really every other creature, that in other words there are limits to its ability to understand. Now, do you think that man, of all creatures, is exempt from all creation in that, to our knowledge, there is absolutely no limit whatsoever? Omniscience is available to us.
But shouldn't we be trying?
I'm not asking whether as an operational principle we should be trying. That's like saying that if I want to be Michael Jordan, should I keep jumping and trying to hit the net? Maybe I should. But my point is, if I said to myself, can I be Michael Jordan, modesty and humility and a recognition of my own impediments, including a bad hip, force me to truthfully say, I don't think I could. All I'm trying to get you to admit is, as human beings, there actually are some limits to what we can know. I'll state one. All the knowledge that we get is experienced through our senses, right? Do you know of any knowledge we can experience any other way? So our senses are like a 5-node tape recorder that are limited in comprehending experience, and no experience unavailable through those can be gained by us, ever. True?
Except for our ability to reason outside of our 5 senses.
But even then the data comes from the 5 senses.
I suppose, yes.
Okay, so right there we've established a finite limit to human knowledge. Even though we can learn more and more, we will never be able to get beyond our 5 senses as long as we are human. We might have telescopes, but we still have to look at them through our eyes. We might have infrared, but we still have to look at that and measure it through our senses. That's my point, that as human beings we should not be so hubristic. Of course we should try. I'm not calling for a ban on human knowledge. I'm simply saying that a recognition of our own limits, and this is Kant's point in the Critique of Pure Reason. Reason should investigate its own parameters before declaring itself omniscient. We should do that.
My question is for Mr. Dennett, and it's relatively simple, and you can take this as you will. I'm just curious to hear your response. What, sir, if you are wrong? What if you're wrong?
I just wish that every religious person would ask that question too. I think that scientists and academicians take very seriously the question, what if I'm wrong? And I've devoted a great deal of thought to that in my own life and to my own work. And I look around me and I see religious people who are positively discouraged from asking that. They are told, don't even think about that. Trust your faith and don't ask that question. And I think that is the height of arrogance on the part of the religious community, not the scientific community. We ask ourselves, what if I'm wrong?
Thank you. Next question.
Hi, I have a question for Mr. D'Souza, which might provoke a response from Dr. Dennett. We're all reasonable people, and part of that is embracing all of the principles of rationality, including the principle of parsimony, which is if you can't prove something by either induction or support by deduction, that you don't accept it if it's a proposition that says something exists or something happens. So I could claim there's invisible fairies in this room, and the only way they interact with us is by tickling our pineal glands. But if I were to say this to you, you could rightfully ask me, what am I smoking? Unless I can provide evidence. So when it comes to the question of God, where is your evidence, or on what basis can you dismiss the principle of parsimony?
Okay, the principle of parsimony, as you stated, is that either something is true by definition, right, or it's true by empirical verification, right? And if it's not true based on those two things, it's false, correct? We shouldn't accept it. Exactly. So let's apply your principle to the principle of parsimony. Is it true by definition? No. Is it true by empirical verification? No. So let's throw it out.
Mr. D'Souza, you use this image of the rock rolling down the hill, which has to obey physical laws, whereas we, who are intentional beings, our decisions aren't determined by physical laws. Would you accept that neurons and the other aspects of the brain seem to obey material laws? And if so, why do you reject the notion that our minds, thoughts, and decisions could be determined by the same physical forces?
Wow, I'm given 30 seconds. Look, you're raising a very deep question about the way in which material things like neurons and non-material things like thoughts, feelings, and consciousness affect each other. I think you are dogmatically